Hi, my name is Lila. I've been working at Crestwood Enterprises for exactly 10 years now. 10 long, grueling, yet rewarding years. It's funny how time flies when you're busy trying to prove yourself. When I started here as a junior analyst fresh out of college, I had no idea what the corporate world would demand of me. Back then, I was just grateful to have landed a job in such a prestigious company. But over the years, something shifted inside me. Gratitude turned into ambition, and ambition became fuel for every late night spent crunching numbers, every early morning presentation prep, and every ounce of energy poured into making this company better than it was before. You might think that after a decade of giving everything I had to Crestwood, I'd be sitting comfortably in some corner office with a view of the city skyline. That's certainly where I thought I'd be by now. Instead, I'm still stuck in the same cubicle I've occupied since year 5, staring at gray walls while watching others climb higher up the ladder. And trust me, it's not because I haven't earned it. My performance reviews are always glowing, outstanding, exceptional, indispensable. Those words aren't mine. They're written right there on paper, signed off by managers who shake my hand during annual evaluations and tell me how much the company values me. Yet here I am, still waiting for the promotion I know I deserve. Let me back up a little so you can understand why all of this feels especially bitter today. A few months ago, rumors started swirling about an upcoming leadership change in our department. The regional manager position, a role I've been quietly eyeing for years, was opening up. Everyone knew it was a big deal. The person stepping into that role would oversee operations across 3 states, manage dozens of teams, and carry significant influence within the organization. It wasn't just a step up, it was a leap. Naturally, I threw my hat into the ring. How could I not? This was my moment. I worked harder than ever during those months leading up to the decision. I stayed late almost every night, triple-checked reports, mentored new hires, and even spearheaded a project that saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. People noticed. Colleagues congratulated me on my dedication, and my direct supervisor hinted more than once that I was a strong candidate. For the first time in a long while, I let myself dream about what life would look like if I got the promotion. Maybe I'd finally get to travel more, take on bigger challenges, or maybe, just maybe, I'd feel like all those sacrifices were worth it. But then came the announcement. Last Friday afternoon, when everyone gathered in the conference room for what we assumed would be good news, our current regional manager cleared his throat and introduced Daniel. Not me. Not anyone else from the team who had put in the work. No, it was Daniel, the nephew of Vice President Richard Harper. Now, don't get me wrong. Daniel isn't a bad guy. He's polite enough, dresses well, and seems competent enough at his current role. But he hasn't been here nearly as long as I have, nor has he contributed anything close to what I've done for this company. Still, none of that mattered. What mattered was family loyalty. The room fell silent after the announcement. Some people clapped politely, but most of us just sat there, stunned. I felt heat rising in my chest, a mix of anger and disbelief bubbling beneath the surface. All those years of hard work, all those sacrifices, they meant nothing compared to blood ties. As the meeting wrapped up, I caught Richard Harper glancing at me briefly. His expression was unreadable, but I swear I saw a flicker of guilt pass over his face. If he felt guilty, though, it clearly wasn't enough to stop him from handing the promotion to his nephew. What happened next only made things worse. Later that day, I found myself in the HR office, not because I went there willingly, but because they called me in. Apparently, someone, and I suspect it wasn't coincidence, flagged one of my emails from earlier in the week. In it, I had expressed frustration about the lack of transparency in the promotion process. Nothing too incriminating, just honest thoughts shared with a colleague. But HR didn't see it that way. They acted like I'd committed some kind of crime, peppering me with questions about whether I planned to retaliate or cause trouble. Retaliate? Over an email? It was absurd. Still, their reaction told me something important. They were scared. Scared of what I might say, scared of what I might do. And honestly, their panic gave me an idea. One I wasn't proud of, but one that kept nagging at the back of my mind. What if I used this fear to my advantage? What if I stopped playing by their rules and started playing my own game? That brings us to today. Here I am, sitting at my desk, pretending to focus on spreadsheets while my mind races with possibilities. I know I should let it go. After all, holding on to resentment won't change the fact that Daniel got the promotion. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. Something inside me refuses to accept defeat, not like this. So I've decided to fight back. Not in the obvious ways, like filing complaints or storming into Richard Harper's office demanding answers. No, that wouldn't work. This place thrives on subtlety, on quiet manipulation behind closed doors. If I want to win, I'll have to play the same game but smarter. As I sit here typing away, I realize I don't fully know what comes next. All I know is that I'm tired of being overlooked, tired of seeing nepotism rewarded while real talent gets pushed aside. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about proving a point. To Richard Harper, to HR, to everyone who thinks they can keep climbing over people like me without consequences. Whatever happens, I'm ready. Ready to show them exactly what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. The first thing I did after leaving the HR office was sit in my car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The injustice of it all burned inside me like a slow fire. How could they treat me this way? 10 years. 10 years of loyalty, of going above and beyond, of swallowing disappointment after disappointment. And for what? To be passed over because someone's uncle held a higher position than I ever would? By the time I got home that evening, I had already started plotting. Not in a reckless, spur-of-the-moment kind of way, but carefully, methodically. I knew better than to storm into Richard Harper's office or send angry emails venting my frustrations. That kind of behavior only gave them ammunition to use against me. No, if I wanted to make a move, it had to be subtle, calculated, strategic. I spent the weekend combing through old files, both personal and professional. Crestwood Enterprises prided itself on transparency. At least, that's what they claimed in their glossy brochures, but anyone who worked here long enough knew how much dirt lay buried beneath the surface. Over the years, I'd kept detailed notes about everything. Project timelines, budget discrepancies, questionable decisions made by upper management. At the time, I told myself I was just being thorough, covering my bases in case anyone tried to pin mistakes on me later. Now, those meticulous records felt like weapons waiting to be wielded. One file stood out among the rest, a folder labeled Harper Projects. It contained documents related to several high-profile initiatives led by none other than Richard Harper himself. Most employees avoided questioning anything he touched. His reputation as a no-nonsense executive intimidated even the boldest critics. But I wasn't afraid anymore. As I sifted through the data, one pattern became glaringly obvious: cost overruns. Almost every major project under Harper's supervision ran significantly over budget, sometimes by millions of dollars. Yet somehow, these failures never seemed to reflect poorly on him. Promotions continued rolling in. Bonuses piled up and nobody batted an eye. At first glance, the overruns looked like bad luck or poor planning. Easy enough to dismiss as unfortunate but unavoidable setbacks. But when I cross-referenced the numbers with internal communications and vendor contracts, something darker emerged. Several vendors had ties to Harper's family business. Payments were funneled through shell companies, inflating costs while padding pockets somewhere along the line. I didn't have definitive proof yet. It would take more digging to connect all the dots, but the pieces fit together too neatly to ignore. For 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I clocked in early, stayed late, smiled politely during meetings, and kept my head down whenever Richard Harper walked by. On the outside, I appeared calm, collected, and utterly unthreatening. Inside, however, I was building a case, piece by painstaking piece. Every lunch break was spent reviewing documents. Every evening was devoted to researching legal precedents and corporate policies. And every night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I imagined the look on Harper's face when he realized I wasn't going to let this go quietly. My next step involved enlisting help. Not directly, of course. Asking colleagues outright risked exposing my intentions, which could lead to retaliation before I was ready. Instead, I relied on subtle nudges, planting seeds of doubt without drawing attention to myself. During casual conversations in the break room or hallway, I'd casually mention things like, "Did you hear about the audit coming up?" Or, "I wonder how long it'll take HR to address those compliance concerns." Nothing specific, nothing incriminating, just enough to spark curiosity and unease among coworkers. It worked better than I expected. Within days, whispers began spreading throughout the office. People speculated about potential audits, Rumors circulated about shady dealings in upper management, and morale plummeted as employees grew increasingly wary of their superiors. Even Daniel seemed uneasy, though whether he suspected foul play or simply sensed the growing tension, I couldn't tell. Either way, seeing him squirm gave me a small measure of satisfaction. But the real breakthrough came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while sorting through archived emails, I stumbled upon a message chain between Harper and an external consultant. The subject line read, Vendor Adjustments, Q3FY21. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, just another routine discussion about procurement logistics. But buried within the thread was a single sentence that sent chills down my spine. Make sure the payments align with our agreed terms. Discretion is key. That phrase alone might not have raised red flags, but combined with everything else I'd uncovered, it painted a damning picture. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was deliberate manipulation. Harper wasn't merely benefiting from nepotism. He was actively exploiting his position for personal gain. And if I played my cards right, I could expose him for exactly what he was. Still, I needed leverage. Something concrete, undeniable. Something that couldn't be brushed off as hearsay or speculation. So, I decided to dig deeper into the vendors themselves. Using publicly available databases and industry contacts, I traced the money trail back to its source. What I found shocked even me. One of the shell companies funneling funds to Harper's relatives operated out of a tiny office park in Delaware, a notorious haven for anonymous corporations. Another shared an address with a law firm specializing in asset protection and offshore accounts. The connections weren't perfect, but they were close enough to raise serious questions. Armed with this new information, I drafted a carefully worded letter addressed to the company's ethics committee. I included screenshots of relevant emails, copies of financial records, and a timeline detailing suspicious transactions. The tone was professional, factual, and devoid of emotion. There were no accusations, only observations backed by evidence. If pressed, I could claim ignorance, insisting I merely stumbled upon irregularities while organizing old files. After all, curiosity killed many careers at Crestwood, but not mine. Not today. Before sending the letter, I paused. Once it reached the ethics committee, there would be no turning back. Investigations would begin, reputations would crumble, and lives, including mine, would change forever. Was I prepared for that? Could I handle the fallout if things went south? For a moment, doubt crept in, whispering that maybe I should let it go, accept defeat, and move on. But then I remembered the countless nights I'd sacrificed for this company, the dreams deferred, the promises broken. No, I couldn't walk away. Not now. With trembling hands, I hit send. The response came faster than I anticipated. Less than 48 hours later, I received a summons to meet with the ethics committee. Their message was brief, almost clinical. Your submission has been reviewed. Please report to conference room B at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. No explanation, no reassurance, just a directive. My stomach churned as I stared at the email, replaying every possible scenario in my mind. Would they believe me? Or would they side with Harper, dismissing my claims as baseless vendettas? As I walked into work the following day, I felt like a soldier marching toward battle. Each step echoed louder than the last, each breath heavier than the one before. Co-workers greeted me with polite smiles, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Even Daniel seemed unusually cheerful, chatting animatedly with a group near the coffee machine. Watching him laugh, completely unaware of the chaos about to unfold, filled me with a strange mix of guilt and resolve. Guilt because deep down I knew he hadn't asked for any of this. Resolve because justice rarely cared about collateral damage. When I entered conference room B, 3 members of the ethics committee sat waiting for me. Their expressions were unreadable, masks of professionalism hiding whatever thoughts swirled behind their eyes. Without preamble, they gestured for me to sit. Then, in clipped tones, they began asking questions about my findings, my motivations, my relationship with Richard Harper. I answered truthfully, sticking to the facts and avoiding emotional appeals. For nearly an hour, we danced around the issue, circling closer and closer to the truth. Finally, one of them leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Ms. Lila," he said slowly, "do you realize the gravity of your allegations? If proven true, this could have significant repercussions, not just for Mr. Harper, but for the entire organization." His words hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the stakes involved. I nodded, meeting his stare head-on. I understand, I replied evenly. And I stand by what I've presented. I trust the committee will handle this matter with the seriousness it deserves. He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded curtly. Very well. We'll review the evidence thoroughly and keep you informed of any developments. With that, the meeting ended. As I left the room, I allowed myself a brief moment of triumph. Whether or not they believed me, I'd forced them to confront the truth. The ball was in their court now. All I could do was wait and prepare for whatever came next. Back at my desk, I opened a blank document and started typing. Whatever happened, I needed a contingency plan. Because in the world of Crestwood Enterprises, survival often depended on staying one step ahead. And I wasn't about to fall behind. Weeks passed in tense silence. The office buzzed with rumors, but no official word came from the ethics committee. Richard Harper seemed unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact and retreating to his office more often than usual. Daniel, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began second-guessing every decision he made. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, continuing to do my job while secretly preparing for any outcome. Then, one morning, an email landed in everyone's inbox. Internal investigation update. The message was brief but clear. After a thorough review, the ethics committee had uncovered significant financial irregularities involving Richard Harper and certain vendor contracts. Effective immediately, Harper was placed on administrative leave pending further action. Additionally, the company announced sweeping reforms to improve transparency and accountability. The news sent shockwaves through the office. For days, whispers filled the hallways as employees processed what had happened. Some felt vindicated. Others were simply stunned. As for me, I allowed myself a small smile when I saw the announcement. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. A month later, another email arrived, this time addressed directly to me. It was from the newly appointed interim regional manager, who thanked me for my courage and integrity in bringing the matter to light. They also informed me that, after careful consideration, I would be stepping into the role of assistant regional manager, a position created specifically to support the restructuring efforts. It wasn't the exact promotion I had dreamed of, but it was close enough. More importantly, it was recognition of my hard work and dedication over the past decade. When I accepted the offer, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. In the months that followed, Crestwood Enterprises began to change. New leadership brought fresh perspectives, and many of the toxic practices that once plagued the company slowly faded away. My new role gave me a platform to advocate for fairness and meritocracy, ensuring that future promotions were based on talent rather than connections. As I stood in my new office, yes, with a view of the city skyline, I reflected on everything I'd been through. It hadn't been easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself. But in the end, standing up for what was right had paid off, not just for me, but for everyone who deserved a fair chance. Life has a way of balancing the scales if you're willing to fight for it. And sometimes the happiest endings come not from revenge, but from justice served and earned.